Hi, Tammy Campbell with Impakt Realty, brokered by Keller Williams Realty West, and I am here with Garrett Frivale to determine exactly what the benefits of a home buyer's inspection is and exactly what you need to know. So, Garrett, thank you so much for joining me today. I would tell you that home buyers love to shop for homes, but once they get under contract, they get a little bit frightened about what's next, and that's the home inspection. Some buyers, especially new buyers, feel like everything should be perfect in the home, and even though it is a used home, somebody's lived in it before, they're a little bit frightened of what they're going to find out. So how can we help them understand about the process?
Yeah, basically that's kind of the job. It's to, when somebody goes under contract and they're obviously hiring us to come in and, I don't just use the word find defects, but that's pretty much what we're being hired to do is find imperfections in the home. And, some people choose to not get a home inspection. I think that's a terrible idea.
I agree with you.
We never really know what we're going to find. And that doesn't matter if the house is 6 days old, 6 months old, 6 years, or 60 years. We can find the same, defects in any of those, age homes. So, when you walk in a house, most people only see the pretty things.
Right.
It's oftentimes that I, point out a leak in a ceiling or something, and, they walk right past it during
right.
the day, and you don't see it. And the realtor will say, well, I should have seen that, and you shouldn't have. That's what you guys are there, to pay me to do. You pay us to get on the roof, you pay us to get in the attic and crawl spaces and, to do these dirty things. But, to answer the question, basically the job is essentially, to educate a home buyer on what it is that they're getting ready to spend their money on. And potentially, hopefully they're not expensive costs to repair when we find stuff, but, sometimes it is. And sometimes we don't know all the answers, but,
right.
The idea is to identify a defect, tell them what it has caused or can cause, and then to tell them what type of contractor or, repair person should either look at it or repair it.
Yeah.
And, sometimes they're small expenses, and like I said, sometimes they're fairly large expenses, and we don't know what we're walking into.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time, like it's, 6 years old, there's nothing wrong with it, and you get there and, you find some things that are wrong. And had one, for example, about a month ago, it was about 5 years old. The shower has probably been leaking since day one. Tile shower enclosure. The repair basically is they're going to have to clear the whole shower out. But you've got to know what to look for.
Right.
When you're in there.
Yeah.
And I would say most of our clients, when I talk to them on the phone, they're always concerned about the roof, how long my furnace and air conditioner are going to last,
right.
How's my hot water heater, and then of course the dreaded foundation.
Right. So that tends to be the biggest concerns for buyers.
I think most people, that it's had a leak, or that it is leaking, or that it's had repairs. And unfortunately, there's, sometimes the repairs aren't always the correct repairs. And,
right.
And, this can create some conflicts too.
Right.
But, most of the time, I think that too much emphasis is probably put on that. Most of the things that we see down there are fixable and not at a super hefty expense.
Right.
There is the odd property where it's,
significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't even know they have the problem.
No, and it's interesting that you would point out the shower, because a lot of people will walk in to try to determine the age of the water heater. They'll try to determine the age of the furnace, the age of the air conditioner, how is the roof, and how's the foundation. I can understand those top 5 because they're expensive. But just when you describe what's going on with the shower, that could probably be the same price of an air conditioner at some point.
And probably in some instances a lot more.
Yeah.
And water leaks. Water is...
Water's the enemy.
Yeah, it's nobody's friend. And it goes for interior and exterior. A plumbing leak on the inside can be just as bad as a roof leak on the outside.
Right.
So it's, determining that is difficult. And small things too, that we don't think a whole lot about, that, they go into a report and oh, it's just smoke detectors, or it's just a carbon monoxide detector, and you know, yeah, it's just, but
Right.
those are
They're still important when you're buying a
yeah,
home.
they're easy things, you know, for a seller to correct, but
Right.
they're missing. You know, it's our job to note it.
Yeah.
And to tell them. So
Right.
you know, but basically, to answer your initial question, the job is to educate people on what they're purchasing.
Yeah.
You know? It's not to estimate the cost of the repairs per se, but it's,
Because you're an inspector, you're not a handyman.
yeah, I mean, we can help, you know, on the small stuff. We can,
Right.
It's this or that. When you get into a foundation, like, what's that going to cost me? You know,
You're not a structural engineer,
right.
but you have those people to help.
Yeah, we have referral partners and people who are happy to, you know, send out for or give you the contact information, who would be happy to, you know, come out and look at it. And, you know, I'm hoping that it's not very often I have to refer a structural engineer.
Right.
When
Yeah.
I was new, I probably did more than I do
Right.
now, but in speaking to them and being, you know, out on site and, you know, you learn things and
Right.
you kind of learn what's normal.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, and obviously structural engineers get involved when there's foundation issues.
Yep.
Maybe attic issues. Is there significant attic issues?
So, you know, a common one that we see is somebody put in an attic fan or you know, an attic ladder, like a pull down ladder, and they just go up there and they cut a truss in half.
Oh wow.
And you know, it's been that way for 10 years. Well, it's still it's a structural defect. Those trusses are built on an engineered plan, and they're not designed to be
Right.
cut.
So the house was built for those trusses to be there, and so
Yep.
if somebody cuts into them, then it's no longer as solid as it may have been at some point in time.
Yeah, those products are actually designed where the attic fan is designed to typically sit on top of the trusses,
Gotcha.
and the garage ladders are actually designed to go in between the
Right.
trusses.
Right.
So, you know, it's somebody. Typically, they're a handyman sometimes or a contractor.
Well, everybody's DIY these
Yeah,
days,
or
right? You can
homeowner.
learn to do everything on YouTube.
Yeah, well, it's just a piece of wood. I cut it.
Right.
But it's a truss. It's a structural
Right.
problem. So, and, you know, again, those aren't usually super difficult repairs, but it's got to come up in a report,
Yeah.
you know.
So if I'm a buyer, should I go to this inspection, or is it good to be there?
I mean, I recommend for all of my clients to come. I have some that want to be there the whole time. I have some that are like, do I have to come? You know, I always recommend at least coming for the last half hour, you know, or 45 minutes at a minimum. It gives them a chance to see the property again. And it also lets me wrap up, and then I walk them through what I find and answer, you know, tell them or show them what I found, and then answer any questions that they haven't. Sometimes they've seen something that I haven't seen.
Right.
You know,
because maybe their dad's house had this going
Yeah.
on. So did you look at this? Because my parents
Right.
struggled with this for
Yeah.
years. And you're like, well, let's go look at it now.
Yeah, and you look at it, and sometimes it's a problem, and a lot of times it's, well, it was caused by this. It's, you know,
Yeah.
it's relatively,
Yeah.
you know, normal.
Right. So what does it mean when you say that the furnace is tested, it works fine, but it's at the end of its estimated life?
Yeah, so, you know, that's part of our job is to identify if appliance is at or near the end of its useful life. And so, you know, there's varying, you know, ranges on age. I use 15 to 18 years in my report for a gas furnace and a standard, you know, electric air conditioner. Electric furnaces have a little bit longer life, but that's one thing our clients are concerned about. You know, we don't want them to get a call and, you know, you told me that it's fine, and
Right.
you know, a repair guy comes out and goes, well, it's 25 years old, it's past its life. So if it's in that 15 to 18 year range, you're getting close to it, you know, we tell them it's getting near the end of its useful life.
Right.
If it's 25 years old, it's past its life expectancy. And what we'll typically recommend if it's operating, you know, is to begin to budget
Yeah.
for replacement. You know, and from a seller's perspective, you know, they're not going to replace them very often.
Yeah, right.
It's functioning.
Right.
It's
If
been
it works.
working.
That's a big thing, though. A seller's going to tell you, if it's working, I'm not replacing it. But
Yeah.
you've got a young couple buying their first house, and they're like, oh my gosh, what kind of expense am I going to have in 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you know, houses you're constantly putting money into them.
Right.
Right? So,
Like children.
yeah, at the very top of my report, I put in you know, a little disclosure, and I call it the 1 to 3% rule. And I basically tell clients to budget 1 to 3% of their home's value for repairs and upgrades every year. And
That's a good
I
idea.
think if you maintain that, you know, even if you're putting 1% in per year, you know, on a $300,000 house, it's theoretically $3,000 a year that you're putting into it. So if you take the cost of a new air conditioner is $3,000 to $4,000, it's really not a hefty. It's an expense, and it's a lot of money, but in comparison to the value of the home,
sure. Right. But you're not going to be surprised either because you were a little advised that way in the beginning when you first got the house.
I mean, we tell people that, and we do get calls, and they call and our water heater's broke. It's 6 months after the inspection, and that's probably the most difficult part of our job is we're looking at it the day
of the inspection.
That we're there, and we don't know when something's going to,
give out.
Yeah. And so that is, I mean, I would say that's probably one of your number one, our frustrations. I don't know if it's always a complaint, but, that's why I think it's always crucial to note the age of it to the best of your ability to find out what it is and tell them how much life is left. Yeah.
No, that helps set them up for expectations. So that way they're not irritated or, mad at you, so to speak, or me, because I get it too.
I mark them as fair in my report, and I tell them they're operating, and I tell them that they're, getting close to the end of their life.
Right. So now, in terms of like a general home inspection, you mentioned important things like roofs. We talk about attics, foundations, equipment. Now, what about if I have a fireplace? Is that something you can look at for me?
I mean, we'll look at the enclosure itself a lot of times and make sure that the hearth is, the correct distance. But in a gas fireplace or a wood-burning fireplace, we're not going to be able to operate.
Okay.
That during the inspection, we're not bringing wood with us. We're not gonna.
Are you serious?
I know. Yeah, right. We're not gonna light a fire in someone's home.
Okay.
So
Makes sense.
we would
because it's not our home yet, right?
Yeah.
Still their home. Okay.
I try to get a picture of the flue. I'm gonna look at the chimney from the top. If I see heavy creosote build up inside of it, I may recommend that they have it clean. But typically, the recommendation is if you're gonna use it and operate it, that you have a chimney sweep come out.
Yeah.
Clean it.
That makes sense.
And make sure it's good to go because it's a fire in your house.
Yeah, and you mentioned gas fireplaces. They're a different animal, just like a gas furnace is a different animal. Yeah. But what is this radon thing? Isn't that gas too?
Yeah, radon is, but it's not a gas that we make or we use in our home. So
I don't pay for it.
No, you don't pay for it. It's a
I guess I don't really want it in my house.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's basically an odorless. Naturally occurring gas. It emits up through the ground and infiltrates the air in our home. And unfortunately, that gas is a known carcinogen. So basically, it's cancer causing. And people will be like, "Well, we don't have that in our area." This is funny to me, or no one on my street has it, or well, that radon. If you do your research on it, I think you'd find quite a different story. The test is relatively inexpensive. Okay. Most home inspectors are probably charging anywhere from, $125 to $200 for it, depending on the size of the home. So, that's a minimal cost.
So then you measure to see how much might be in
we're
there.
Basically going to put a monitor in the basement. It's going to run for 48 hours. It's going to take a count every 1 to 2 hours, depending on what kind you have, and it's going to come back and tell us, a result. And basically, the EPA. Their recommendation, we use 4 as a benchmark, 0.4 picoliters. Basically, they now say anything between 2 and 4 you should consider because no amount of radon is a good amount of radon.
Gotcha.
It's naturally occurring. If I walk outside right now,
it'll be outside.
It's going to be outside.
I've heard that if you have a lot of moisture too outside, you might have higher. I don't know.
Yeah, higher levels. I mean, basically, houses are like a stack effect. So as pressure builds or air is coming through the home, it can pull or draw more air or radon at a given time. That will occur sometimes during heavy rains, high winds.
Yeah. How do you get rid of it?
It's relatively inexpensive in comparison to most home repairs. The fix essentially is they're going to find a location in the basement typically, or a sump pump is another way that they can go in. We're basically going to put in a PVC pipe, draw the air out from underneath of the concrete. It'll have a fan somewhere in the attic or on the exterior of the home. And then we're going to discharge that air into basically above your roof line and above your attic space is the idea.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good that there's a resolution. So obviously the radon, we talked about the fireplace, the equipment, you mentioned the roof, the attic, the foundation. Have you ever walked into home to an inspection and you're like, oh my God, you should not buy this? Yeah. Nope. No. You tell your clients, Tammy, no. Anything ever like that happen?
No. I mean, there are homes where I've had to corral my clients and tell them that this is important or that this is expensive. I was doing one this summer, and we went in the garage, and the termite inspector hadn't made it there yet, but it didn't matter. I had identified the damage of the termites, and the home termite is a wood destroying insect. It basically had, they eat wood, so basically it had chewed the whole header of the garage out. It was in the attic trusses, in the wall framing, and this is a rare occurrence, right? This isn't happening.
Sure.
For me, I encounter this once or twice a year, but I'm not telling my client not to buy that home, but I'm telling them this is what I can see.
Right.
I don't know what I can't see.
Right.
And the rest of the home, and already in there, we were looking at if I were just guesstimating a $10,000 plus repair. So no, I mean, I've never said don't buy this home.
Right.
But I've also had clients that I don't know what their skill level is or their parents' skill level, and my dad's a carpenter and he'll fix that and whatever.
Right. So, and what's scary right now is the market that we're in. So many people are buying houses, quote, as is, and they're saying up front, we're not going to ask for any repairs. But then you have a garage where a header's been eaten up by termites. Yeah. It's like, oh my goodness, that's makes them reevaluate what they're thinking. My job is the negotiator. Your job, is the educator.
Yeah.
But having a team of people that can kind of support you in which way they go, I think that's important.
Yeah. So this year I've had a lot of clients that are on the fence. They'll call me and, well, I only want to do this inspection because the seller is not making any repairs, and that puts us in a difficult situation. Of course, my job is to recommend everything to you. I'm at least going to give you the option,
right?
To do it. But this couple in Florissant, they weren't going to do it, and then their realtor talked them into it, and they called me back, and I came out and did it, and it was a very nice, very clean home.
It wasn't.
Very few. I'm going through. I'm moving quick. I'm not really finding any problems.
Sure.
I get in the attic, and for 2 foot all the way down the whole center of the ridge of the home, the plywood is rotted and there's water dripping.
Oh, water, the enemy.
Right.
As stated earlier.
This particular home also, and I happened to be there on a day it was raining, had water in the electric panel.
Oh man.
And it had a leak on the front foundation. So they were still going to buy the home, but they went back to the seller, even though the seller said, I'm not going to make any repairs, and said, listen, we found
significant things.
Right. And they met him, on some of those repairs, but had they not done it,
right.
And they closed 3 weeks later,
they would have been really upset.
They would have been upset.
With all the water stains that have landed on the ceiling. Right.
So I say I've had 10 this year,
Yeah, they've been a little bit scary.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, if you don't inspect it, you don't know.
Yeah,
right?
You're right. And the stories go on and on and on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that you were able to share some of the highlights that buyers need to be thinking about. I mean, buying a home is a huge investment, and it's something that you want them to know what they're walking into. But I think what I've always appreciated about you is that you keep it simple, and you don't get dramatic with what they're saying. You just talk about, this is what it is, this is what it's going to take to make a difference. The report might look a little different, but in all reality, it's just, this would be the approach that I would take if I was buying this home.
Yeah, so I don't have an emotional attachment to the home.
Correct.
Okay, and I don't like to, and I try to maintain that, right?
Sure.
So I try to be as calm as I can, and I may consider a smoke detector to be a bigger safety issue than water coming through a foundation. One costs more, one's a bigger safety issue.
Right, because you can live through the water coming through the foundation. Sure. The fire, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
There just wasn't enough water coming through the foundation to save me from this fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the answer is I don't know. And if we get in, I'd say my older clients, like, probably...
My age?
I don't know, 60 and up.
Okay, that's what I mean.
Maybe even 50 and up. I don't know. There's just they seem to be handier. They want to do more things themselves. And not to say that there's not, of course, there's younger people and people who this is what they do, but those types of clients tend to be like, I understand that I've owned a home.
Right.
This isn't a big deal. I know it's a simple fix.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful.
Someone who's never owned a home, and you get a 40-page inspection report, and it's got 20 deficiencies on it. To them,
that's significant.
It's excessive. And so I would say 2 things if I have deals that come apart, and it's not that many. Most of the time the realtors do a good job of working the problems out and figuring it out. But when they do, when I ask them why, it's either the list was so big that I couldn't comprehend it, or there
Right.
was this one thing that they couldn't,
and
get past.
That makes a lot of sense. If that's how they're judging whether or not they want to move forward, one major issue or just a plethora of issues.
Yeah. It's usually one of the two.
Yeah, no, it gives me something to think about, because if I've got a big list, how can you, combine things to make it seem more reasonable for them to attack, so to speak, or to have a conversation with the seller.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have a way to judge them and go, this is simple.
Sure.
We can have that conversation.
Right.
But, and it's just...
So I guess that'd be my final question about this. Are you available after the inspection to discuss things with buyers?
Yeah, of course, it's not over then. We're going to provide them a detailed report, but, if they have a question, and I send that in my email, please call me with any questions. Like, sometimes a half hour on-site's not enough, or
sure.
I forgot to show them something while we're there. But, in my report, and you've read enough of them, I tend to be a bit more wordier, and I spend a little more time detailing the locations.
Right.
And probably trying to explain it a little more in there to avoid that, that call.
Sure.
And especially in the spring and summer when we're super busy, I can't be on the phone, all the time. Then I'm spending my time there with my client, doing a job for them.
Right.
And if I'm on the phone, I'm not doing that job. So I personally, in my report, I spend a little more time writing it, and that really helps reduce that. And, but I, a lot of times I follow up, or I'll send them a text or a call, and you have any questions, and most of the time they're good. Sometimes they do have a question.
Yeah, to be a resource after the fact is huge.
Yeah, I have clients call me a year later, like, hey, this is going on.
Right. Yeah, did we see this?
Yeah, and sometimes we can go back and go, yeah, here it is in the report.
Right, or they'll lose their report, right?
Nope, not with the software that we use.
I know, your software is amazing.
There's no way that they're going to. We're going to give them a username and a login.
Right.
It's cloud-based. Of course, they can print it or save it, but as long as, or I can send them an email again, but their username and password is theirs, and
that's awesome.
That report's there forever.
It is great, because when they go to sell again, they can review everything that they learned about the house, what they addressed with the house, and what,
Yeah, I just, sometimes we wish they would, a lot of times I guess when I go back out, and we'll do houses that we've done 2 years, ago, and we end up doing the same home, it resells, and you look back and you go, okay, well, you didn't,
right.
They didn't,
things didn't get taken care of,
do this, and this, or,
right.
People call me and like, my home inspector said it was fine, and I'm like, the seller may call me and, well, let me see the report, and you look back and you're like, well, he did tell you to fix them, and,
right.
You didn't, but
I mean, awesome.
Basically we're there to educate them. We're not there to, our job isn't to scare them or to influence their decision. It's basically to provide them with a report that tells them what, what's wrong. I think that's also hard because we don't tell them a whole lot about what's right,
Right.
You don't get to highlight this and be like, this part of the house is wonderful.
Even though this is like, this is your negative list. These are all the cons to my list. Look at this pro list. Like, it's amazing. Yeah.
So that's
a good point.
And that's hard too. You know? But that's really not what they're paying us to do.
Right.
They're paying us to tell them about the condition.
Yeah. Make them aware. So it's education. It's some advice. It's information. Hopefully to set them up. Letting them know, kind of like a health check of the house, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good way to put it, and letting them know what they're buying.
Right.
It's just the biggest thing.
Well, I appreciate you going through all of that. I know it's going to be super helpful to share with people, especially new buyers, and even buyers who haven't bought for 25, 30 years. They forget what it's like. They forget what they're going to hear, what they're going to say. Things change, right?
They do. So we'll hear that from clients all the time, like, that sometimes they'll bring their inspection report, and or they'll pull it up and they'll be like, this house was 20 years ago, and it was a lot different, There was some writing, but it was a lot of checking boxes, and not as much photos, and you see a lot of handwritten reports. And that was how it was.
Yeah, right. Makes sense.
So what we're doing today is, we're most inspectors, and I would almost say almost all, are using some form of a digital report.
Yeah.
And they're going to include photos.
Yeah,
the photos
so
just
important.
Help you. One thing I like to do too is it can take a couple of pages in the report, but I like to take a picture of every room. It lets my client see that was the condition. This was here on this day.
Right.
We couldn't see this because of this, or we couldn't access this, and it lets them know what I was looking at.
Yeah.
At that time. So
Yeah.
it takes up a little more space, but I rarely had a client call me and say my report's too long.
Oh, right. No, exactly. Because it's a story. It's part of their story.
And then we do the best to cut them down.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody to have to digest
Absolutely.
50 or 60 pages. It is difficult.
Yeah. I think that's what I enjoy about being in real estate is that you get to participate in the story of someone's life.
Yeah.
And just to be there to support them, advise them, educate them in all of their moves, so to speak. And I also think it's important to have an inspector that I can trust. And I almost don't want my buyers to choose their own inspector because I rely so much on your expertise. And I think that as a realtor, I have an opportunity to use a lot of different vendors, but I want to use one that I know that I can trust, that I can rely on. You've always been there. You're there to schedule the appointment. You do a great job with the clients. So this is going to be pretty valuable.